meditation can give you that experience without you having to leave the planet. No, and here, I mean, and no, but here it's, I saw it this morning. They're saying 0.4 meters at 19 seconds, which, so you're saying you're going to have a 2 foot, like a foot and a half wave every 19 seconds, but the energy builds up. So, I mean, most of the morning was calm, but I would say every 20 minutes or so, this set came through that was roaring, and it broke, and, it had multiple waves to it, and it was, complicated, but you had to wait the 19 minutes
I was saying yesterday, I think there was like one set yesterday that was actually decent.
Right.
And there was a couple of fun ones, but nothing crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just on small days, you just have to wait. I mean, I remember paddling one day, and I decided, the energy is really low. And it might've been 1 meter, like 22 seconds or something. Yeah. And I thought, it'd be no problem. I'll be able to get out on the paddleboard, 11 foot thing coming, I got an 11-foot paddleboard, and I figured, it'll be easy. I go out, and this set comes in. I'm standing in the water. I got 6 feet of water above me, and I'm holding on to this 11-foot board, going, "This is not." But once I got past that, it was fine. Every 20 minutes or so.
Here, don't be there, no.
Yeah, but if you every 20 minutes or so, if you got a wave.
That's what I'm trying to learn from Dave.
What's that?
Like, look where he sits and be patient.
Yeah, and
he's good at that.
He's really good at that. I've seen him sit still for 45 minutes.
I go crazy after 20. I'm like, okay, fuck that. I'm going to the.
Well, I get crazy after about 5 or 10. I mean, I can wait, and I've done the 45-minute waits, but one day it was 45 minutes in between the large sets. I mean, but this is double over it. It was crazy. I paddled all the way to Saladita and came back. I was exhausted. Well, I made it to out. I was, Los Panchos was still. I didn't make it around the point, but I made it to. I could see Los Panchos and look back, and I could see Punta Mahala.
And then paddled all the way back here.
Yeah, but it was also the wave that came every 45 minutes that day was. I mean, it was one of those days where you can take one and feel really satisfied. Yeah. I mean, it was huge. It was absolutely huge.
I had one day, and I was all by myself out at Boca, and I was shitting my pants. I was like, "No, you're here now. You fucking go."
Right.
And then I took one wave, and I was like, "Okay, that's it."
Like, right. No, it's
I made it.
Sometimes that's all you need. It's especially when you're by yourself.
Yeah, when you're by yourself, and I was like, I don't want to push it too much, because if something happens out there. If you get your board in your face.
Oh, I had that happen once. I was all by myself, and I lost control of the leash. I don't know. I think the leash didn't break. I think it just got yanked out of my hands. I'm way out. I had to swim all the way in because the boat took the wave and came on the inside and was just bobbing along. It didn't hit the shore, just bobbing along. And I'm like, oh my God.
Come back.
Yeah, right? No, it didn't do that. I went for a long swim, and I was by myself. And, that's a little scary. I still am getting over dengue. Dengue was the most.
It's crazy, huh?
It's a friend of mine got it. I wish I could say he's a Scotsman, so the way he described, he has a different way of relating the English.
It's okay.
Well, he described the way not only dengue gives you a fever and you feel like pneumonia and your energy is really low and you think you might die, but there's an internal experience to dengue that's really terrifying, in that it's
like a trip, or
it's like existential. I mean, when you feel that weird, that weak, it was sort of like, why am I here? I love the way he described the questions. Why am I here? What am I doing? How did I get here? Sort of all the. It was really interesting the way he described the questions.
Did you get scared?
Yeah, I mean, it's those questions are impossible to answer. The existential ones are like, what is my function in life? Who am I serving? What is my real purpose? Am I honoring my ancestors? The person who's told you would amount to nothing. Are they right or are they wrong? It's when you're having those thoughts and you're by yourself and you're sick, it's sort of you're
it's
weak.
not like a track where like, okay, in 4 hours it's going to be like I'm going to come down.
You can have those questions or ask those questions of yourself when you feel good, or like, you're out in the waves and this thing comes in and you think you're going to die. You're not worried about, am I a failure? Am I not? Or it's all about survival. And, if you tell somebody that somebody says, I really want to kill myself, drag them to the ocean, put their head under, what will they do? They'll fight to live.
Yeah.
But when you're sick and weak and you have those same questions, they can be like the wave. They can overwhelm you.
Crazy.
And it's just, so there's an aspect of dengue that I didn't expect that part, and I didn't communicate it to Craig, who's my Scottish friend, that was part of it. But I also didn't have it's not that I was afraid of sharing those feelings. I wasn't. I didn't know that somebody else would have them and take them seriously. Oh my God, he started talking about having these existential thoughts while he was really physically weak, and I just had to laugh. I said, "Oh, I did too." But and dengue also has this thing. The exhaustion is real, so that if you overexert yourself, you'll feel that sick. It's taken a good month. I got dengue in early November, and I had some sort of
like 3 months ago.
It's been 2 months. So it's been 2 months, and now I'm starting to feel better. The last thing I want to do is paddle out there and all of a sudden go, oh my God, I'm sick.
It sounds like dengue is next level.
No, dengue.
And it's like I have like other friends from here. It's like they got hospitalized and like sent back to the US and everything because they were like in blood transfusion and I don't know what.
From COVID or from
from
dengue? Yeah, no, dengue is next level. I mean, I had pneumonia when I was in my 30s. And had pneumonia, and I was in the subway in New York. And I was, full suit. I think I had a fancy Barney suit on that day, and I had my leather briefcase and all my stuff, and I was defenseless. I felt so weak. It was one of those things. You don't want to feel like that. If somebody, I would have given. I was toast. I felt completely defenseless in the New York subway system. I had that frame of reference when I got dengue, and that I didn't. I'd been that sick, but yeah, dengue is next level. I mean, it's worse than pneumonia.
It's kind of scary that it comes from like the little fucking mosquitoes, no?
Yeah, and sometimes
there's nothing you can do about
it. Yeah, I mean, you can sit, and I sat there for 3 years. I type outside at night, not a problem. The fourth summer or the fourth winter or whatever, I get this thing, and it's like it's completely random. And now when I get when you sit up as the sun sets, sometimes the little bugs come out and they start biting your ankles. I'm like, well, which one? Now, one good thing about, there are 4 strains of dengue, but once you have one strain, it's like having measles. You're never get it again.
You're never gonna get it again.
Right, but that means there's still 3 strains left.
Some people told me you see like a red, like a circle or something, like different aesthetics to the bite. Did you see that?
I didn't see the bite. Well, what they did do, I got sort of. Craig went and his blood work turned out, he's in Ziwa. He went to a doctor. I went to somebody here. What?
To the local bushman.
Pretty much. I went to a local person, and they put a tourniquet here, and not a tourniquet. They put something here to, they cut off the blood circulation. So, and immediately all these red splotches started coming up in my skin. And
so did you feel like something in your body?
Yeah, I mean, I went to them because I felt sick, and I was like, "What do you have? Could you do a blood test?" And they, what do you think you have? I think I have dengue. They put this thing, they like a capo on a guitar. I don't even know what you call it. So and all of a sudden the red splotches broke out, and they go, "That's a sign of dengue." And I was like, "Okay." And then I did do a blood test, and my blood work came back normal. Everything was normal. My platelets were a little low, which is again another sign of dengue. They're your platelets. I don't even know what platelets are.
And how do you know then that you have dengue when your blood work is fine?
Well, one, you go to the local. You trust the local. The local witch doctor, and also if the local witch doctor tells you've got dengue and your blood work comes back normal except for your platelets, and platelets are a sign of that happens during dengue, then it's 2 indications that you have dengue. and then everything else, the process of healing, and everything else has been, you know, if it, you know, smells like shit, looks like shit, tastes like shit, it's probably shit, you know.
Yeah.
You know, if it, you know, same thing here. So it's,
Yeah.
if
But
it,
it's good to hear that you're in recovery.
yeah. And then of course last night I got caught in the rain, so you know, in the cold.
So you have like cold symptoms?
No, I had a little cough just now. If I laugh too deeply, I think that was. I also had, when I went to also did another test and said, oh, you have a throat infection. So I had a viral infection, the dengue, and I had a bacterial infection. So they gave me antibiotics, and you know, like I said, everything was good. I felt
Do you
so
have to
good.
take like strong like antibiotics or strong medicine, or you just leave it to your body?
I took the antibiotics for the throat. That cleared up like right away, 4 days, and right away, 4 days, and then the other the virus I had to let it work itself out. You know, a week later I felt great, and I went and did my whole route of exercise, and I came back and I was flat for another week, and
Yeah.
then I
So when I
took a
met you
little
on the beach,
slower.
you told me like you went for a run and then you were like out for a week.
Yeah,
No?
yeah. So you know, you just have to you listen. You have to you have to listen to what the infection is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it says, like with my knee right now, if it says to mellow out, because if you don't, it's just going to hurt you, or you know, you end up hurting something else because
Yeah.
your body's compensating for an injury.
I think that's super. Like I play a lot of tennis, so like I have things with my shoulder every now and then it's like every now and then your body tells you something, right? And it's always so interesting to learn about, and I really appreciate it now to like you can go online and find everything out. It's like I had back issues after building the place, the house, and I kept stretching, and I was like, oh, it's not getting any better, and they were like, yeah, you have to rest because it's like your nerves, you know, and they don't want to get like fucking work, they want to rest,
Right.
like relax, don't do anything.
Well, it's also usually your back has something to do with support. Like if you don't,
Yeah,
financial worry lives in the lower back.
uh-huh.
Guilt lives in the middle back, and I forget what lives in the upper back. So
it's
there
a
are
stress
different
factor.
So I read this book years, because I was having, it's not chronic back pain, but I had back pain frequently, and you know, I was always exercising, and I was like, and I wanted to keep exercising. So I read this book called Healing Back Pain by a guy, Dr. Sarno, Sarno. So Dr. Sarno was a back surgeon, and he was treating people who didn't have any structural problems in their back. He was doing surgeries on them because it would ease their pain. And it's all in the mind. This is what he came up with. He came up with this thing called tension mitosis syndrome. Tension, it's a syndrome. So what he's of the belief that all physical pain is a manifestation of an emotional illness. The left side of your body has to do with the feminine side. The knee has to do about how to move forward.
Okay.
You know, so it's and the knee also represents pride and ego. So like hip pain is grief.
Where do those beliefs come from?
Well, those I've learned. So Dr. Sarno had tension mitosis syndrome, and I discovered that when I admitted what stresses I was under, to my back and to myself, the pain would alleviate in a way. It was just, I would be free of the pain in a way that
no stretching and no exercise could
nothing. Yeah. It was just like, it was sort of, all right, you're coming clean. Your body can't hide the fact that your mind is creating a place of pain because it wants attention. You know, human beings we're complicated plants. You know, we have the same structures as a plant.
Yeah, you can see it everywhere.
But we're free to move around, and we need water, light. You know, just like a plant. So we're complicated plants that have no roots. So Sarno taught me that, and then I don't know if I had an acupuncturist. How do I know that this is the left side of the body and the knee and the hip? So I had this, I think it was an acupuncturist or a chiropractor who was not a disciple, but they were a student of Louise Hay, who founded Hay Publishing, sort of in the 70s and 80s. It was considered New Age. I don't know what it would be called now. Well, New Age was sort of New Age was sort of hippie logic. It was
Yeah.
sort of alternative medicine, I might be called. So and that's what Hay Publishing has gotten into. But so Louise Hay published this book called Heal Thyself, and it basically said, all it's the same idea. All illnesses are manifestation of emotional. You're out of sync. You're out of sync emotionally, and your body is finding a place to put this so that you don't have to deal with the emotional illness. It manifests itself as a physical illness, and I find that a lot of it is really true. And even some of it, like I mean, she has death as being desire to leave the movie. I don't know that one yet, but the like alcoholism manifests itself as futility. Futility.
Futility was that?
This is pointless. It's that existential moment of why am I here? Nothing works. Futility is nothing works. Nobody loves me. This is pointless.
I'm not good enough.
Yeah, all of that is a manifestation of alcoholism. So I'm studying this stuff for 30 years and paying attention to it. Like whenever I feel that way, I kind of think, oh, it's just my alcoholism. The antidote to this is pointless, I feel bad. If you drink, you'll feel better. You quiet that
it's not
thought.
The problem, is the solution.
Right. So alcohol. I have a friend. I have a friend of mine who says, I came to AA for my drinking and my alcoholism, and then I found out the problem is me. It's that the alcohol is just a symptom. It's the medicine that makes my life tolerable until the medicine doesn't work, and then because that can happen. So it's the antidote to futility is this the rush that comes. But alcohol gives you a rush, and then because it's a depressive and its structures, it sort of eventually it doesn't work.
That's why you're sitting here. I just went through this, like, I don't know what happened, but for some reason I was like, I don't want to drink anymore.
Good.
I did for like 20 years. I think that this was my answer to my problems.
The alcohol was.
Yeah. And then I was like, oh, I want to quit. It didn't influence my life in a really bad way, but it stopped me from like going for it, going for like a full life. And something was like switched last month.
Good.
And I had like breaks and everything, but now I'm like, I don't miss it. I don't need it.
Right.
Sometimes I like when other people come like that you used to like me to drink with, still get this feeling like, okay, one beer, and I'm like, why do you want to drink it? Because you like the taste, or you like what it does to you? And I'm like, no, I like to like switch off my brain and use alcohol for it. So I'm just gonna leave it for now.
I liked it because I liked it for its effects, and I've always wanted to chase oblivion. I liked there not being Benito. The concept of Benito. Benito had responsibilities even when he was in diapers. There was. I was expected to do stuff. I was expected to recognize and hug people I had never met. That was, as a kid, you're like, this is your grandma. I'm like, I didn't know her. You get, it's just a weird thing. I don't think I was conscious of it, but, and then, I came to the United States when I was 3, and suddenly like everybody's speaking another language. It was so fucking weird to me.
Yeah.
And,
where were you born?
I was born in Chile in South America. And, it was just, it threw me, that experience just sort of threw me. Everybody else knew something I didn't know. And I don't know, I lost my train of thought, but alcohol, I liked, playing sports. There was no thought of Benito. If Benito was worried about picking up a ground ball or hitting the tennis ball back, Benito can't do it. But once you drop any sense of Benito, I can hit the ball back. I can chase the ball. I can get the throw across. But if I think about me doing it, I've failure.
I had my favorite painting I ever made. I called it Whiskey.
Right.
Because I had a couple of whiskeys and I just painted it without thinking, and it's my favorite painting ever.
Yeah.
Because of the simplicity and everything, and I switched, like I didn't have to like use my brain. I was just there and like enjoyed it and do it.
Yeah.
And that's what I use alcohol for a lot, like insecurities and all that.
Yeah, I mean
but I think if you like, or for me it was like the switch, like, no, dude, you're okay the way you are, like.
Yeah, it's also what I found. I mean, I haven't.
In this life, no one has it figured out. Like just.
Yeah. Well, it's also I can reach the non-Benito stage. Again, big wall of water coming at you. If you start thinking about yourself, you get tumbled. If you go with it and do what it tells you to do, generally you'll be fine. You may crack your board and you may lose your boat, you may get hit in the head, but generally you're fine. uh, and it's, I found that now through meditation. I'm in the not Benito stage is readily available to me.
What does meditation mean? That's one of the questions I actually wrote down. What meditation means to you. And
well, actually, you taught me what meditation means to me. We were on the beach and you said, why do you meditate? And I was so stunned by the answer that came out. It makes me less dense. And dense. And as so I think you taught it to me. You asked the question and I gave you the answer, but it was, I hadn't thought of it that way. So meditation, there's, living is hard. Living is heavy. When you're meditating, I learned to meditate counting, because the mind likes to do that. The mind is really good at counting and putting things into boxes and stuff. If you give the mind, just let it count. I would count to like 10 breaths, 6 breaths, 6 count in, 6 out, and then get up to like 10, and then 10 out, and then finding this thing. And then eventually I would lose track of the numbers. And then when I first started meditating, and then all these thoughts come through, and somehow you're suddenly in second grade and Mrs. Richter's yelling at you, but you let Mrs. Richter go because she's not coming back. And you can think about what your experience of Mrs. Richter is and how you can connect Mrs. Richter to your mom or your dad, or you can connect to Mr. Coons, another teacher. You can connect them to however you want, but it doesn't make any difference. You're still breathing in and out. And I wasn't attaching somehow I wasn't attaching to the thought. I was able to observe the thought. To me, that was a gift. And then I just kept at it. Because the thing that happened, I started to realize that if I sat still for 20 minutes and did this little breathing routine, that after 20 minutes, I would just break out in a smile. And I didn't expect that. And then I started just meditating until I smiled, and it was just like, that was really cool. Now I've been doing it. I meditated for, say, I don't know, 10 years or something. And then I didn't, I was raising kids and running and, I was just.
About what age did you start?
So I think I started when I was probably 30. And then when I got to be about 40 some, I stopped meditating. And then I was 50, and my body was in pain, and I went to a chiropractor.
Your feminine side or your masculine side?
It was the feminine side. And then I went to a chiropractor, and he said, "What's going on?" And I was honest with him, and he said, "Start meditating because your life depends on it." He goes, "Are you meditating?" And rather than saying, "Well, I used to," and then I just said no. For one of those things where, do you speak Spanish? Well, no, I used to. It was my first language. And then, all this stuff. Do you know how to cook? Well, I do, but, I was let my wife, I didn't, there was none of this, do you know how to ride a motorcycle? Well, I've done it, but I was really, there were no excuses. It was like, do you meditate? No. It was I was like, wow, that was so easy. Just admit to what you don't do, and I've done it a lot since then. And I said, no. He goes, start meditating like your life depends on it. And so I was 50 years old. I'm 63 now. So I've been meditating daily for 13 years.
13 years. But the other day, like, if your mind's really crispy and you don't know really how to meditate, kind of like it's going to be like not really helpful. And they like write down shit, like start journaling.
You can, but it's, the desire for something to, whether it's the law of attraction or however you want to call it. If you set your intention on something, like I want to learn how to surf. If I want to, I've never set my intention for that because I had the kayak. But if you set your intention on something, I generally find it comes to you, and it's without getting too woo-woo about it. So if you're serious about meditation, people will suddenly appear in your life. It's sort of you get lost in the woods and suddenly somebody goes, "Oh, that's the way out." You're like, "Oh, what the f-"
I think meditation, but it's also like making the decision and like adapt your life to it.
Yeah.
And like for me, it was very important that I let go harmful things that I've done, drinking too much, whatever,
right,
indulging in alcohol, and like letting this part go to attract the other things.
I mean, and the alcohol part, I mean, there's a reason why they call it spirits, because it actually it sort of it connects you to a spirit, but it's that spirit can be can run hot and cold. Um, it can be egotistical. It can be whatever the opposite of egotistic, humble to, the alcoholic is the only person who's lying in the street looking down on people. And I would drink until I would pass out in the street in Manhattan. So I was essentially like a bum on the corner.
Yeah.
But I was looking at people going, oh, they're fucked up, but I was lying in the street. So it was fun. I remember at University of Miami, I was at school and I had fallen asleep next to the University of Miami has a big lake in the center of it. And I woke up next to the lake. And when I woke up, everybody was going to class. And I'm laying there going, look at all those idiots going to class.
I'm smarter.
Yeah, I'm smarter than that. And there I was, I'm out of college. I mean, what are you supposed to be doing at college other than going to class? I'm supposed to be sleeping next to the fucking lake. So anyway, if you watch, you watch Derek Jeter pick up ground balls, or you watch a rock climber do his rock climbing, you watch somebody like Dave surf, you watch, somebody, I don't know modern tennis players, but watch them play tennis. It looks effortless, right? They've been at it since they were, forever. So when you start to meditate, it's going to be like rock climbing. You're going to fall and you're going to cut yourself, and you're going to get into spots that are really hard to negotiate. But if you do it for a bunch of years, the handholds, you don't fall into traps as much. You don't go back and talk to Mrs. Richter anymore. You don't end up in second grade so often.
Yeah.
And you're able to become less dense. You're able to, that sort of the be here now kind of thing. That it's a part of what the Buddha's experience was, that, and I guess I was just reading about this in Be Here Now, was the sense that I'm replaceable. That I am not that important. And that actually, what I was reading in Be Here Now today was the idea that death is an illusion, because you never stop existing. Your energy or whatever form, your form on this planet as a bird or a tree or as a human being ceases, but you don't cease to exist. It's a weird concept, but that's and that's what meditation can give you, that experience without you having to leave the planet. And it's a lot of it is, it's the like I said, the idea that physical pain is a manifestation of emotional illness, that the meditation can separate. Through meditation you can separate that connection of the Benito-ness, of the I-ness. I lost my train of thought a little bit, but that's sort of
I read Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now, and he says in the beginning, which I loved, I can't live with myself like this anymore. And then when he realized, like, okay, there's like, who am I talking to when I say I can't live with myself anymore, which I found really interesting, which helps me a lot to, like, when I'm catch myself overthinking, I'm like, wait a second, like, get out of your mind and like look at your, like, what's happening up there at the moment, and then maybe you can get away from it because it's not that important right now.
Right. But it's more natural to become attached, and that that's why things like alcohol have such a draw for people. It's that it does suspend all the structures. I mean, it is a spirit, and it's fast. It's
easy.
It's easy.
It's way easier than to sit down and learn how to meditate.
Yeah.
I learned it from a monk in Thailand when I taught some kids English, I think like 12 years ago now. And he would sit down with us in the room and he'd just say, like, okay, you breathe in, you breathe out, and it's 1. And you do this until you're at 100. And if you get lost on the way, you start again.
Oh, cool.
Like to get to 100 can be like overwhelming in the beginning, I think.
How do you learn meditation? Like, you just gave me a clue on something that I can use. Even though I've been meditating for 13 years, I've never tried to, count the 6 in, 6 out, 10 in, 10 out. I've never tried to get to 100.
I did it the other day, like backwards, which is easier to stick with it because I have to think more about the numbers. Because or sometimes I do it like from 1 to 10 in German, from 11 to 20 in Spanish, and so like use different like just play. I've learned to play with it. I like breathing techniques a lot for like calming down my nervous system when I'm getting like irritated by something. I was driving with my mom and my fiance in the car, and for no reason I got like irritated by my mom saying something. She's like, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, oh, okay. And all I did is like breathing 3 times with like holding the breath and counting it, and boom, it disappeared. I think that's amazing. So many people are scared of it, I think, and like, oh, that's just like blah 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 and hippy dippy bullshit. But
well, the ancients knew.
It helps a lot.
I mean, the practices of meditation and prayer and things like that, the ancients knew. You know,
I think that's why it's so important that we sit down and talk about this stuff, because it's a lot of like very spiritual people like, oh, and talk about it like this, and then like I can't really take them serious because it's like life is not all about like wow.
Right.
But I think it's really important that we like it's very helpful, I think, for everyone. There's a few certain like movement is good, and like good nutrition and everything. There's like a few basic things that we need, like plants need sun, water, and light.
Right.
Sun, water, and nutrition.
No, if you know, unfortunately, we see a lot of it here. People drinking Coca-Cola and eating chips, or you know, you see it all around the world now with younger kids, and it's not good gas. You know, if you want your car to perform well, you got to put good gas in it.
Yeah.
You know, before, you know, years ago you could put different grades of gas. Now there's only high and low, but it's important to put good fuel in. You know, if you eat hamburger, you know, I read this was probably 40 years ago. I read a book that said it was about the science of combining foods, which I can't remember what it was called. It was health, sex, and longevity. I think it was what the subhead on it was. But it basically, I almost remembered it and it flew out again. So basically, you don't want to combine bread with meat with a milk and wash it down with a carbonated cola. That, you know, those. Now you can eat ice cream. Eat ice cream. Just eat ice cream. Don't combine it with anything. I was like, oh, what a justification. But you don't want to combine a cheeseburger with a soda because your body can't break that down. You can eat as much cheese as you want, eat as much bread as you want, but don't combine them. And I was like, morphology, I think is what. And I was like, well, but you know, it's we're all taught to, you know, eat a cheeseburger, have a soda, that's lunch, and move on. Have some chips too, you know that, and that's not good fuel. You know, you're going to get old faster that way. Yeah,
I think it like everything now, or at least what I see on in the media, is we get to extreme.
What do you mean?
Like one side is saying like, oh, I don't care, I eat whatever I want, and the other part is like, no, don't eat this, don't eat this, don't eat that. It's like, just eat moderate, you know.
Right.
Like you can eat a cheeseburger every now and then, it's not going to kill you.
Right.
You can drink a Coke whenever, like if you want to do it every now and then, it's not going to kill you. When people stop caring about their body and just like indulge in like emotional eating, but not an emotion of like, I love my body and I appreciate the food I get, but like in a
stuffing it,
very unconsciousness. I think that's making the quality of life of a lot of people very, very bad.
Yeah, you know, you become a slave to something that you don't want to, you know, you don't want to work for, you know, and it creates an experience that isn't the experience that you want. But you're also, you know, you're because you're stuffing and rushing, you don't get anything else other than stuffed and rushed. And then you wake up and you're stuffed and rushed again.
I think the issue is like the lack of awareness, no? Because I think if you take a group of people and you sit them down for, let's say, 4 weeks, and you give them cheeseburger every day for a week and ask them, write down how you feel, and then you give them different kind of food which is more nourishing for your body, and you're going to ask them after a week, sit down and write down how you feel, everyone is going to have the same conclusion, that I feel better, energy wise.
Well, I think it's a bit of a problem of how did you describe it? That it was awareness,
like a lack of awareness.
I think part of it is just accessibility of thought. Like people say, you know, you want to get sober, and then people think it's hard. Yeah, you know, in AA say you don't drink, you go to meetings, and you call your sponsor, and then you got to work on the steps, and then other issues are going to come up and you have to deal with those. That sounds really hard, right? But if you don't drink and you're open to everything else, all this stuff falls into place. You got to so the the benefits of Alcoholics Anonymous come to you when you do the first thing is don't drink.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's if you tell somebody who's got a mortgage and kids and car payments that they can eat, if they would take the time to meditate and eat better, that they would be able to function at a higher level. How are you going to pay my mortgage? It's sort of the accessibility of this new kind of thought is it's not they're aware that this could get through, but how do I get there?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's trying to see if I can create another parallel.
You think it has to do with like if the pain is big enough?
Well, no, it's like, when I tried to learn, I haven't learned how to surf, but I took the kayak out into the ocean, and a wave came, I turned and I caught the wave, and then I got thrown down.
Mm-hmm.
But I really liked how that felt when I caught the wave, right? And then I paddled back out. But sometimes the waves would come in and knock me over, and I would get thrown out of the boat, and I had to swim back to the boat and get back in the boat, and then I would get all the way out there, and then huge things would come because I was surfing hurricanes, and I had to realize at some point that getting thrown out of the boat had to be part of the fun, and that if it wasn't, then I shouldn't be in the water. It's sort of we use a baseball analogy. In baseball, they measure things like errors. You make a boo-boo,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't make a play and you get an error, or you strike out, but sometimes you might get a home run, you get a hit or you score a run, but sometimes you don't. It's sort of you have to, the failure or that the difficult moments are part of the experience, and that's because most people want their lives to have this sort of trajectory that you're going to succeed and get better and better and brilliant. It's like, no, it's more like a heartbeat,
Yeah.
and I think that's an uncomfortable thought for people, and because
it's hard to accept, no?
Yeah, because it's I worked out with an Olympic wrestler who I don't know, he saw how much I was running a lot and playing sports, but I kept getting injured. And he said, you need to work on your muscle mass. I was in my mid 40s. And I said, what are you talking about? And
I'll show you.
Right. He basically.
They fought you into half.
He charged me a lot of money each time to work out. But he had me work out. But one of the ways that he had me work out, like I would lift weights, I would lift a lot of weights, but only for a minute. I didn't do reps. It's like they teach you in school, like you do a set of 10, and then you do this, and then you do come back and you do another set of 10, and then you work out. He would have you work out until on that 10th, if it was a 10th one, it might be the 8th one. He did it by time. If at a minute you were like falling apart, he was like, that was great, because he knew he set the weight of your limit at a minute. I have a funny reaction to failure. I would start laughing.
Uh-huh.
So I'm doing crunches with all this weight, and then when I was laughing, that I was done, and that was one of the ways that I learned to accept failure as being a teacher, and being a limit, being people consider limits as being bad, restrictive, controlling.
Proof of like I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah, but acceptance of that was really cool.
Yeah. I'm the same when I have a wipeout on big waves.
Yeah.
And you get back up, you're like, whoo, let's go.
Right.
Yeah. It's probably not the best because you should focus on your breath. But I'm sometimes like, wow, that was intense.
I love it when you take a wave and you come in and you kick out, and then you can't celebrate because you got to get through the next two that are coming. Yeah. And then when you get through those two, you're on the other side. Then you go, whoa, and then that was it. But you can't celebrate.
Surfing is like, it's very, how do you like? It happens very fast, no? Like if I make it behind these two waves, there's going to be more fun right behind.
Right.
And in real life, it takes like years probably of commitment and doing it until you're like,
Yeah, but it's you can call it, I think, awareness, but it's also making the experience of an alternate, everybody wants to conform, everybody wants to be loved. That's why we all try and do our best as children, and then at some point either you realize that, well, my best isn't going to be liked by Henry, or it's not going to be liked by Sue, and it's not going to be liked by Mrs. Richter, and it's not going to be, it's my mom and dad. It's, you start realizing that, you, that doesn't always work. You have to find other things, but but all of that is externally based. You're trying to please all these other things. You're trying to fit in. You're trying to get love externally by doing, and I think we're programmed that way. We're
from a young age.
From a young age, and I grew up as an immigrant in a new country that had a certain experience of America. Was a clubbiness. Like, you went to these 7 schools. If you didn't go to an Ivy League school, you weren't shit, and then you belong to the Yale Club and the Harvard Club, and you network in these clubs, and that's life. And there are more than 7 schools nowadays. I mean, when I went to University of Miami was founded in the 30s, so in the 50s it was considered a down school, and now University of Miami is almost 100 years old, and it's considered a very it's academic thing. But anyway, but that we're programmed from that from a young age, looking for approval by, nowadays it's what car you drive, the clothes you wear. There I was in a Barney suit in the subway. It's your status is, or your happiness is, I have a house in Mexico. That kind of thing becomes the thing that defines you. It's like a brand.
Essentially, yeah.
And
to a lot of people.
Right, and that's where so the awareness that that's not it, but it's also an accessibility to another thought that the happiness isn't anything that's going to be external. I had a tough time, I would say. Well, I ended up in an affair, but let's say I was in my late 40s and I was constantly unhappy. Some of it might have been alcoholism, some of it may have been my ex-wife. Some of it just should have been me. I was dissatisfied, but I'm also expecting the world to do X.
Did you do a lot?
Did I do a lot?
Like, were you successful in business or?
Yeah, I mean,
in the external world.
Well, I was the president of a design firm. I had 8 people working for me. We were doing stuff for.
It's considered successful.
Yeah, I never felt that successful. I mean, because I could always look at that guy over there, or I rode the train from.
So you tried to play the game by the rules of society, but you felt deep inside that you were like.
It was hollow, the whole thing.
But jam.
At this, I got sober. There I am lying down on the street, thinking everybody else is wrong. Right? I get up. And I realized, well, maybe they're not all wrong. Maybe I'll just do what other people do. And that conformity brought me a lot of happiness and a lot of money and stability. And I attracted
as well.
I attracted a mate. I had developed a family. But 20 years into that, I was miserable again. And it wasn't. I didn't have alcohol to blame it on, and I could have blamed it on my ex-wife, but I'd gone to Al-Anon enough that you're pointing something, that you're causing me pain, that these are back. There are 3 fingers pointing back. Anytime I blame something for somebody.
It's the truth. No one wants to hear that shit, but it's like it is.
Yeah, it's just because we're all the same person.
Yeah.
You're just taller than me. Yeah. There's no, why would I treat Seb any different than I would Dave?
Yeah.
Or why would I treat Seb any different than the guy who picks up cans on the road here?
Yeah.
Like, we got to get the house ready because somebody's coming on.
What's your answer to that? Like, why do we do
that? Because part of it is conditioning. We've been conditioned to think in boxes. Why do we, it's, but also why do we wipe our ass? I mean, we don't have to, because you learn how to do that because it allows you to function it easily in a way that you don't smell and
that you don't have to wake up every day. And I think sometimes some routines or habits are good for us, so you don't have to wake up every morning and reinvent your structure of the day. But I think it's very good to go and check in with yourself every now and then, like what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, you have to.
And why I'm doing it.
Yeah, I mean, an unexamined life would be bummer. You'd just be making garbage and acquiring stuff.
So one of the most important things, I also want to bring communication back to build community again, and I don't know why, but it's always been such a big thing for me. If you go to the supermarket, say hello to the cashier and say
Yeah.
thank you. Like, it's not a machine. It's like
Right.
a real person sitting there,
Yeah.
and like at least like people go there and like beep beep beep. Okay, but give me 50 and then leave. I was like, no. Hello, how are you today? Thank you.
Yeah.
And like to everyone, it doesn't matter if it's a CEO or a garbage man, or I say it here, like I have friends that have like $1 million beach houses, and I have friends in Lagunitas who live like with 8 people under the same roof.
Right.
And it's like one is not better or whatever than the other, you know?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, when you're gone, I mean, there might be a bunch of people fighting over your stuff. They're telling stories.
Yeah.
You know, my son had a friend who overdosed recently, and I coached him when he was younger. And
Overdosed too.
I don't even know what the drug was.
Just gonna check if this is recording. Keep talking.
No problem. So Dan died, and you know, I knew Dan for a minute. You know, was when he was 14 or 15 years old, and but Dan hung out with some of the same kids that some other kids I coached, and but the stories we told of Dan is what Dan is he's in a not Dan state at the moment. You know, but he Coleman and I were able to bring him back. My son and I were able to bring him back and enjoy him as he was, and that is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And the world that Coleman and I were able to connect in a moment in time that we were close. It's not that we're not close now. It's just that we were there, and there was a heart moment about Dan and this other kid that we hung out with a lot. Because Dan had all the ability to do all the stuff that I wanted him to do on a baseball field, but he was not interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily, I didn't care. I mean, Dan was 6'4" and could throw a baseball harder than my son did, and he had all the tools, physical tools, but he wasn't into it. I couldn't care less.
Uh-huh.
And so, because he didn't fit in my box, I didn't care. But anyway, Dan's gone, and we got to bond over it. So when you go, what gets left is the community that you created.
Yeah.
It's not, so I had a friend of a friend, but I had this old friend who was he died, and he argued a case. He argued a case that allowed the way broadband has been developed, like TV and radio and internet, and he argued this case where somebody was, I forget how the case went exactly, but either the government or somebody wanted to privatize ownership of frequencies that allowed transmission of data, and he argued essentially for the system that we basically have now, that it could be privately owned, but it had to be shared, but it had some regulate. He argued against what some other government control or some other thing. So Dana dies, and now the chapel was filled. He like 300 people showed up at his thing, and the obituary in the New York Times talked about this lawsuit that set a precedent that allowed the development of the entertainment industry and communication industries to follow, because based on this decision, right? Those 300 people weren't in the chapel because of that decision. They were in the chapel because Dana was a kook. He's the kind of guy, as an older guy, he called his wife Duchess. He had no idea if he owned a washing machine. Duchess, do we own a washing machine? Now, Dana liked to drink, but
I'm amazed sometimes how people are like so in their own world, sort of,
right,
that they don't even realize like.
Yeah, but Dana was cool about that. He was disconnected from sort of like
like the daily. Ooh.
Yeah, it like out where he lived in the Hamptons, everybody has gardeners, right? And he's off doing his own yard. He's a child of, he's died in his 80s, sometime in the 90s. So he was born in like 1910. You take care of your own yard, right?
Yeah.
So this person comes by and asks about the yard and about the house, and then is the owner good to you? This person asked. She goes, yeah, she lets me sleep with her. Because he was the owner, But he just made it like his solution was to say, yeah, she lets me sleep with her. And the person on the other didn't realize that he was the owner of the property because he looked like a schleb. He had, pants, he had some pants on and ripped shirt. He had country clothes. He took his Brooks Brothers outfits that he wore in New York and he brought them to the country once he wore out in New York, and he used them as his country clothes. So there he was in, stained clothes doing his yard work. And
kind of people.
But that's what people didn't remember. They didn't show up in the chapel for the guy. Some of them might have showed up for the guy who the brilliant lawyer. Most of them showed up for the sense of community and goofiness that Dana created around him. Dana bought a house, and when they bought it, said, I'm going to fix up this bedroom and we're going to fix up this bathroom. When I came along 30 years into their being in that house, they never got to that, because they had kids. It was more important to the kids, and the kids, the friends of the kids had a place to sleep than it was to, we got to renovate this room and close down the house. It was just like, and that's why 300 people showed up at Dana's funeral.
Good values.
Yeah, it was more about community than it was, than it was about like some sort of achievement. It's if you look at famous writers, somebody like Allen Ginsberg. What strikes me about Allen Ginsberg now, I mean, you might read his poetry and disagree with his sexual orientation or his politics and everything, but notice where Allen Ginsberg shows up. Like, he shows up in Tangiers in the 50s. He shows up in Mexico in the 40s. He shows up. He's like a very Zelig-like creature. He sort of adapts, but he's everywhere. He ends up Bob Dylan's roadie, in 1970 on the Rolling Thunder tour. He and his lover, or husband, or friend, Peter, end up as Dylan's roadies. He ends up, it's just funny to see all the connect. So he ends up in the punk scene. He ends up in all these things. He gets I think Clinton gave him a Medal of Honor. He ends up in all these scenes, but it's the community around Allen Ginsberg that's really, it's even more important than his words. The notions that the ideas he expresses in Howl, and some of them, his peace poems, and I don't like a lot of his writings, but man, I dig Allen Ginsberg.
They build these communities because they're very authentic, or what does it make them to attract like so many people?
Well, it's
for
like
their personality in the end.
Well, let's take somebody like Patti Smith. Patti Smith, had success in the punk scene in the 70s. She gets married. She decides to raise kids. She doesn't do any music or much art for almost 20 years. And then, Patti Smith is everywhere as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And she's, so somebody could say, is it authentic? I mean, there are people who, that Ginsberg was a schmoozer and he was only out for money. But, he was more famous than he was rich. And same thing with, I think Patti Smith doesn't have a lot of money. I mean, she probably has enough, and she's secure, and her kids may be secure. But so the question is, I would find anyone to tell me that Patti Smith is not authentic. She is completely, she's honest. I mean, what is authenticity is a matter of expressing yourself honestly, I think.
Yeah.
And not
unapologetically, I think. Yeah, just say what you want to say, I guess.
Say what you want to say, and being wrong isn't bad.
Yeah.
It's sort of
that's what I'm learning now with like mid-30s or in the beginning of 30s. Like, I don't have to make it right for everyone.
No.
It's like, it's impossible. You can be liked by everyone, or you can be yourself. I like the quote, because if you always say like what people want to hear, you lose yourself very quick. Yeah.
You're going to be with yourself longer than anybody else.
Yeah.
So you might as well enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
That sort of trying to define authenticity is it's real. It's back to the Velveteen Rabbit. The story of the Velveteen Rabbit.
I think authenticity for me is to say what you think, to express your opinion, without being scared of like losing something or someone after. Like if I say, I don't think we need trees and plants anymore on our planet.
Right.
And then a lot of people are not going to like me after that.
Right.
It's like, yeah, but I'm authentic, like I think
Right.
this, and it's like I express it without bending it or whatever. Like I think like what I see now, um, people say something, a few days later they say something completely different, and I'm like, that's not authentic. You just say it because it brings you money, power,
Right.
or attention or whatever, you know. And that, but you can't like of course we all say something and we can change our mind about it.
Uh-huh.
But there's certain things that I'm like, no, like you said, like women are, I don't know.
No, I got it.
It's
You know,
hard to
it's
put it on a topic because it's normal to like get educated and change, and I think that's
change it. Right.
inevitable and it's important. But I do have my values, and I think it's very important that we treat each other nice. And then 10 years later, I'm like, no, I never said that. Like, no, I think it's good to be yourself, and you can be a cunt, you know, if you
No,
want to. It's like
you,
no,
no.
like
It-
it's like have your values and live after them, and that's for me is
yeah.
authenticity, and not to bend my truths to others people's liking.
Yeah. That's a good definition. You know, I mean, I could look up what authentic means, because I think all words. I mean, words don't teach, but
I love it. Like the in the German language, it's very straight.
what's it called? How do you say it?
Authentizität, but not for that example, but for like, or in English, when I'm depressed, I just need deep rest.
Right.
You know, it's like
Well, you know,
all
alcohol.
my body's telling me like, okay, just slow down. You're doing some like you do too much of something. Addiction is like I want to add something to my life. I'm
Right.
addicted to nicotine. Like I think I need to add it so
Right.
I feel good, or coffee, or social media, or whatever.
Right. Or disease. You know, disease is a sickness, but it's also a feeling of not being at ease. You know,
Dis-ease.
disease.
I love language like this, no?
Authentic, coming from the author, or genuine from the late Latin, and that's evolved from the Greek, which is original, primary, at first hand, one who does things for oneself. So authentic is from authorship, same sort of root, but doing things for oneself is to be authentic. But that's genuine,
Being
real.
an author, no? Authentic, yeah.
Yeah, genuine, real.
It's like I like because a lot of the question I wrote down we already talked about, and I want to talk about your work and why you do it, and it's interesting because like authenticity, and you're an author of your poems.
Right.
So how did you? Because I think you're writing since 4 years.
Well, I had there was this girl I was hanging out with. You know, why did John Lennon learn how to play guitar? So he could get laid, you know, that kind of thing. So I was with this girl. I was in high school, and I was a voracious reader. I had read as a kid. I read.
Mhm.
Mostly nonfiction. I liked history more than I liked fiction. But I read and 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 read. And I was about 19 years old, 18 years old, and I was hanging out with this girl, Lynn, and you know, I thought Lynn was really great, and we were, you know, we would eat LSD and hang out in her room, and Lynn and I had a lot of fun together. Nothing sexual, right?
Where's that?
This was in Connecticut, a little town in Connecticut. So, and Lynn had this like an apartment. Her bedroom was in this attic. Her parents let me up there all the time. It was the weirdest scene. And we would drink heavily, and anyway. But there was no sex, and there was no romance. And I think she, at some point, she said, "What are you gonna do with yourself?" And I was like, "I don't know." You know, I didn't have an answer. I just want to have fun, you know. And the next morning, I woke up and said, "I want to be a writer." You know, I don't know if that was to please Lynn or not. And I was like, "Where the fuck did that come from?" And but I'd never written anything.
Do you ever find the answer why, like where this came from?
I have no idea, but I was like, what a challenge. I'd never done this.
Was it a good decision for you?
No, because I never really, well, I don't know yet, you know, just to be honest. So what I ended up starting to do is I started writing stuff on pieces of paper, and I would save them. And then I would save them. And then I got to college, and I decided I didn't want to be a history major. I went to one college and I was a history major, and I did really well, and I got some interesting courses, and that was really great. But and then I took a year off, and I ended up in a bar in Atlanta, and this jazz bar in Atlanta, and I was the busboy and bar back, and you know, I was supposed to be invisible, you know, but what I was really doing is watching everybody. I was observing what was going on around me, and I just and I realized that I didn't want to live my life and end up in a bar complaining about the world.
Yeah.
Because that's what I saw these guys doing.
Oh,
And I also, and the whole jazz scene, people sitting there listening to music, bopping up and down like this, which is great. That's jazz people do that.
Yeah.
I was in there just trying to get systematically things out of people's way. That's what a busboy, clearing stuff so people could live their lives. And I just loved the role, man. It was like being a sprite, you know. It was like, and just keep your mouth shut. Nobody thinks you're important. It was a great, you know, for a kid who had always gotten really great grades in school. It was a perfect, humiliating role for me, you know, and I loved it.
Was it easy in the beginning?
No, because I was arrogant. I was like, you know, I don't want to be. I'm not a busboy. And then I was actually the dishwasher for a long time, but I liked that job too because it taught me a lot.
Yeah.
So I kept writing stuff down, and then I decided, oh, I want to go to college. I want to be a writer. So now, and you know, because now I had sort of a direction, but I got into the English department and I could write papers. I could writing narratives or writing poems was really hard, but I just kept at it. I never stopped. I never stopped writing on the pieces of paper. I don't think I can stop now. So, I mean, I've been doing this for 30 some years, and then certain teachers have come along. People have come into my life that have taught me, like, I hate adjectives. You know, I don't put like, you know, it was a dark, forbidding sky. It wasn't, you know, I don't use adjectives. I mean, I do on occasion, but you know, you want to create experiences for people. You also want people to read something, even if it's a story about, you know, a guy that died. You want to take them from one place and go. You want them to read the next sentence. You know, I also fell into a group of people who, like, poetry is meant to be read out loud. You know, give them something fun to say, give them something, and you know, and an experience. Now, most of my work tends to be philosophical. I just entered a weird contest recently where people read your poetry, and then it has to get to a certain level to advance to the next round. After the first round, I was at 169. And Ora said, "How many people were entered at the contest?" I said, "I think 169. You know, I must be the worst poet ever." But my poetry somehow went to the next round, and now they published the top 30 poems. I'm at 24. So
where did this get published? In the book?
It's in some. It's a publisher, and this is how he decides what he publishes. Yeah. So you know, the craft, or how did I get into it, was one of it was impulsive, but secondly was just sort of like a collagist. You know, I collected little experiences and then I put them together in a way that I hope will take some, you know, I think the function of a poet is to delight, instruct, and move, so that you give them something fun to say, something interesting, instruct, an aspect of teachability, but without preaching, and then motivate them towards something. And if it's not fun, and you know, because words don't teach, you have to give people an experience. You know, you can tell a kid, you got to circle the ball to be able to pick it up, bring it into yourself, and then step with the right foot first and line up your shoulders, and then hand the ball to the first baseman. I mean, that's how you do it. You can tell them that until they're blue in the face, but until they get out and actually do it, then it becomes art.
See someone else do it.
Then you can get somewhere. Now, and the reason I'm telling this whole long story is that someone in one of the comments was that your work is philosophical. It's not storytelling. And you know, I was like, well, fuck him. And then I was like, well, some poetry is storytelling. You know, and some of it's philosophical. It's just, you know, and you can try and do both. You know, it's sort of, I don't know. It was an interesting comment from somebody, and it's, you know, it's, I don't know. I like somebody telling me your work sucks. I didn't mind 169. You know, now I'm like, well, what if I fall from 24 and get into 31? Because they published the top. I'm like, I didn't care when I was at 169. I don't really, I mean, I do care, but I don't care that I'm 24, because again, because I don't think I can stop writing. I wouldn't want to.
Has it been easy for you to publish your work, or was there a time where you were like,
Well,
"Oh, I would like I'm writing down a lot of stuff, but I just keep it for myself instead of like sending it to the world."
that's in some ways I still feel like the latter is the case, that I keep it to myself. So what happened for me is I I never, I mean, I always wanted to write, but I'd never perceived that I would have income from it. And I was the guy with the mortgage and the kids. I was the guy sleeping in the street who gets on his feet by working in a corporation, and eventually I got to be the president of a small corporation. And though I was scribbling stuff all the time, I was constantly scribbling stuff. So Aura's dad died, and I knew if one of the people I met along the way was this writer who did this book, and who dealt with a lot of offbeat characters. The book was called Please Kill Me. It was an oral history of punk music. So Aura's dad was art director for the Jefferson Airplane. He was a Hell's Angels. He designed posters for the acid test. He helped paint the bus further with the Merry Pranksters. He was one of these people who was he was the manager of a band called Blue Cheer that people like Eric Clapton and a lot of musicians look to Blue Cheer and say that was the first punk band. That it was, or that it was a do-it-yourself kind of outfit, and he was it anyway. So I ended up. So I hadn't really written. I mean, I'd written for corporations, and I'd written for the local paper, and I knew how to tell a story. And I sent. I did a little thing on Aura's dad. I sent it to this guy who wrote this book, and he said, "I'll publish it." And that was really the first time I was published in a world that I respected, even though I don't know anything about punk music. It was the first time I mean, I'd been published in newspapers and written articles about stuff and written opinion pieces, and and I'd convinced companies to spend money to do X because I wrote these long plans for them and created all the logic behind why they needed to do this. I got 8 of the world's largest banks to get together to do a deal with this tech company. All the players were in place, but they were going to walk away from the table because they didn't have guidelines, or they didn't have enough to go ahead on an agreement, and I helped write the agreement. So I knew how to write and tell a story and be convincing. But writing for Legs, that was the guy who wrote Please Kill Me, was the first time I ever got to write. I was 57 years old.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how like your tone and everything changed and your facial expression when you talk about one thing and then the other.
Right.
It's like, I think one feels for me like it's like in this corporate world, and I did it because I was good at it and worked for some reason.
Right.
And the other is like I could show myself and like, wow, that works. Like, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So, and then I ended up writing for Legs, and then I got, some of the stuff I did for him was the most popular on their site. Again, I'm not a punk person. I just wrote about what they call counterculture.
Is that they publish in the Death is Always no, what is it? Death is Always a Surprise?
No, that was that one just got published recently. But anyway, I ended up but not only I ended up writing for this magazine, but it introduced me to a certain level of people. So I got really lucky. Some of the people I connected to. I mean, you can go to Allen Ginsberg's site and put my name in, and my work comes up. It's like, yay, Allen Ginsberg! But he's dead. But the legacy, there's a connection there. I would have loved as a kid to be connected to Allen Ginsberg. As much as he represented everything that was wrong in the world to my parents, whether homophobia, Judaism, all that kind of stuff that my parents were prejudiced against. I would have loved to have been connected to him. So anyway,
that's Aura's dad.
No, Allen Ginsberg's not Aura's dad.
I know.
Aura's dad was a biker named Gut Turk, Alan Turk, who was really a cowboy. So there's a long story in that. And then this magazine in France asked me I did some work for them. I did a piece on, I don't even remember who I did the piece on. And she asked me, do you have any poetry? And now I'm 59 years old, 58 years old. And I sent her a 4-line, 6-line poem. I mean, I have these other things that were all, about butterflies and unicorns. Or, I wrote something that was based on surrealism. I just sent a 6-line poem, 4-line poem actually, and she printed it. And
you want to read that one? You want to read that one?
I could, and then from there, I sent it to somebody else. But then I could say I was in this magazine and that magazine, and then I just so I don't know. Since then I've had 20 some poems published, but I haven't had luck with a publisher. The only publisher I had luck with was somebody who wanted me to pay $3,000 for them to publish my book. And I'm like, no. I would like somebody to pay me $3,000. I don't, I'm not looking for a big payday. I would love a big payday, but I wasn't about to. So, but that also taught me that somebody would be interested. And what I just entered a contest. I don't know why the number 3,000 came up, but if they print your book, they'll give you 3,000. And what I did is I sent them 22 poems or 25 poems that have been published before. So I know that I'm sending something off that has some people, somebody liked it.
Yeah.
The criteria for the submission was it had to never be published together, and all 25 had never been published together. So send it off. I'll find out in April if they may just send thank you for your submission.
Yeah.
It didn't work for us now. Keep writing.
And I think that doesn't teach you I think just entering the contest or putting yourself out there, your work is already a big accomplishment, huh?
Yeah, well, when it first appeared, and I had one poem that took me a long time to write. It was all based on kissing builds up your mouth was the opening line. Which is an idea that was put together that something that Wavy Gravy said. Wavy Gravy was a comedian named Hugh Romney. So Hugh was a comedian in Greenwich Village in the 60s. But Hugh stayed at his thing. He discovered I think at Woodstock he put together the team at Woodstock. He was still Hugh Romney then. He put together the group of people that cared for all the other people. He put together the food, the health. He started working in communes and he organized a commune on the West Coast called the Hog Farm that's still around. And Wavy Gravy, Hugh later on started this thing called Camp Win a Rainbow. It was and he also put together a foundation to help people with sight. And then he got nicknamed Wavy Gravy because he was wearing tie-dye and BB King. He was on stage acting as a tech or something. He goes, Wavy Gravy. His name stuck. Yeah. And that's how. So anyway, I took this line from Wavy Gravy and turned it into this whole meditation about sort of kindness. Kissing builds up your mouth. And most of it, if I think about it, most of the poem is about kindness. And it ends with the idea that bitterness is not a flavor that you can get at the ice cream store.